What you're looking at is footage of Sonic Overture, a fan game that has in the last year been cancelled, rebooted, and recently had a new demo released. And I've seen a lot of buzz about this on social media, so I decided to download it, dig into the history of it, and I've figured out that this might be one of the most exciting developments in the Sonic community in a long time. The Sonic community is known for making great games, amazing fan-made games, and Sega is known for quite graciously allowing them to exist. We posted about that Link's Awakening game that summarily disappeared from the internet, but I'm not nearly as afraid of that happening here. For starters, because while the game was canceled in the last year, rebooted, and has a new demo, it started its life back in 2014, so nearly a decade ago. And the primary developer for the game, Jas, has publicly canceled the game, as I mentioned, going so far as to say it on their Twitter, where it seems like a new team has picked up the project and decided to continue to run with it. And from what I've seen, this is one of the most impressive Sonic fan games that the community has managed to put together, like right up there in terms of how cool it is with Mania. And there are a lot of similarities between Mania and Overture. Now, of course, Overture is not funded by Sega. It's not an official game in any sense of the word. However, I do hope that that changes, because I think that with the right funding and development resources and everybody being able to work full time on it, this could turn into something that rivals Mania in terms of just how well received it could be by fans. And I don't say that lightly. I think that there is a lot of shared knowledge here, or at least shared ambition. And what I mean by that is the fact that while Mania looks like what would have happened if the Genesis design ethos continued on in perpetuity and we got a modern Sonic game as though Sega had never changed the formula for the last 30 years, this looks to what may have happened hypothetically if Sega had gone into the Saturn generation without pushing so hard for Sonic to become a 3D game franchise that we just never got anything on the Saturn. The Saturn was a 2D powerhouse, but you wouldn't know it based on what Sega and the rest of the industry was trying to do. The push for 3D was so big, it was the next big thing, and it was kind of a shorthand for communicating how powerful the 32-bit generation of consoles were, that 2D went largely ignored. But the Saturn had a host of 2D games that were incredible. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, these games that appeared on the Saturn were excellent. They were beyond reproach. It was the place to play 2D games. So this team thought, what would it be like if Sega went into this generation with their head on straight? And they made Sonic a launch title for the Saturn. That is why this demo for Sonic Overture is called the Sonic Overture 95 demo. And when you beat it, it gives you a splash screen jokingly saying that the game is coming in 1996. But it goes much further than that. When you play this game, you realize that this definitely could have been on the Saturn. It runs at a much higher resolution than anything the Saturn could have put out, so obviously it's doing things that aren't quite fully possible on original Saturn hardware, and I'm not expert enough on the architecture of the Sega Saturn to know if this game would have been possible, though just from the look of it, I feel like it would be. It feels like it's using the same color palette and depth that was available on the Sega Saturn in the mid-90s. In fact, there are a lot of subtle design cues that make me feel that this game could have been fine on the Sega Saturn. It uses mostly sprites from Sonic 1 and 2, with some new animations that are really well done that feel like they fit the existing Sega Genesis sprite sheet perfectly. It uses a slightly higher color depth than the Sega Genesis was capable of, which of course the Saturn had no problem displaying color, so this to me wouldn't have presented an issue. And it uses some very minor 3D scrolling techniques to make items pop in and out of the background, or to have 3D platforms that kind of pitch and yaw against the background to make places for Sonic to stand on. It's impressive tech, and it fits really well with the mid-90s aesthetic of using very simple polygonal graphics along with some detailed sprite work. I think that this could have actually existed on hardware, but we'll never know. The team doing this has not said anything about actually putting it on the Saturn, though they did include a Saturn boot logo at the beginning of the demo, and they just have really brilliantly captured the aesthetic of what it was like playing platformers in the mid to late 90s. It's clear that the team has done their homework, because it feels different from Mania in that it feels like a Saturn game and not a Genesis game, but it's the same in that they've captured the essence of what made 2D Sonic so good and so interesting. Now, when you look at this, it's weird to think of it as a sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, kind of fitting in between Sonic 3 and Knuckles and the eventual release of Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast, because it uses those Sonic 1 and 2 assets. However, that is a very intentional choice, because the story of Sonic Overture, which to me is the coolest thing about it, takes place before Sonic 1. It acts as a prequel to the Genesis trilogy of Sonic games, establishing it canonically as the first game in the lore of Sonic. And that is really cool because of how far back they went. Now, if you played Sonic Superstars, you may have noticed that Sega was selling, with the deluxe version, I believe it was, a prototype Sonic Rabbit skin. It's well known at this point among Sonic fans that several different concepts for Sonic were considered, and among them was a rabbit. Now, this rabbit is being treated as a separate character in Sonic Overture. He is kind of the Knuckles of this game in that he is a pseudo-antagonist, or at least I assume he'll be a pseudo-antagonist. He pops up at various points throughout the demo, of which there are 2 zones, each with 2 acts, and he just kind of messes with Sonic, laughs at him, points in his face, dances around him, and does some more harmful things that I won't spoil here because the demo is free, and if you're on a PC, you can go play it now. There's a link in the description, and I highly recommend you do. But he basically messes with Sonic and tries to ruin his day. That's all well and good, but who is the primary antagonist? Now, you have to remember, this is a prequel to Sonic 1. And it turns out that, at least as far as we can see in the demo, that is still Dr. Eggman, or at least some variation of Eggman. Now, I say some variation because when you break open robots, there are no animals contained inside. Instead, fireworks just go off, and when you pop a container at the end of a zone, there's just nothing in it but fireworks. And there's no real lore reason given yet that I can find as to why there would be fireworks and why Sonic needs to break any of these things in the first place. However, the coolest thing that I encountered in this demo, or one of the coolest things, was that the first boss of the first zone was Eggman, but in his original pajamaed concept art form, back when he was considered for being the protagonist of Sonic 1. So he's wearing a sleep cap, pajamas, he has a pillow. It's true to the original concept art, which is really, really cool, and it's really amazing to see a fan team go into this depths of kind of obscure Sonic history to pull him out as a boss. And rather than using any dastardly weapon or device, your first encounter with him includes him just hopping in a ship and throwing random stuff he has in the ship at you to try to get you away from him. And in there are multiple Sega references. I got hit with an Opa Opa from Fantasy Zone on one of my attempts. In the trailer, I saw that he threw a Puyo out of there, which is a really deep cut that goes all the way back to Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and its ties to Puyo Puyo, which is just one of the coolest details I think I could have found in this demo. But it's really neat to see this kind of expansion of the Sonic lore going back in time rather than just continuing on forward. They could have easily said, oh, it's a Saturn game, so we'll place it between 3 and Adventure, but they didn't. They used Sonic 1 and going back from there, which makes the design language of this game make so much more sense because it uses sprites from Sonic 1 and 2 for Sonic. And as such, it has kind of a evolved version of the Sonic 1 and 2 design language rather than the kind of more aggressive designs that were used in Sonic 3. And that was puzzling until I realized where this placed canonically within Sonic's lore. So I have to say, so much thought and consideration has gone into this that I just have to see Overture through to the end of its development. I have to see this become a finished game, and I hope someone at Sega sees this video and reaches out to this team and makes this an official collaboration. Please, this game deserves all the polish it can get. There is a lot of hints of greatness here. There are some things that I think could use some work. Sonic perches atop totem poles in this game, and I think those come by just a little too often for my taste, but there's a combo counter that encourages speedrunners to go as fast as they can and to literally break things on their way. I think that this game has massive potential to appeal to a whole group of Sonic fans that have been waiting for the next big thing since Sonic Mania. This could be our Sonic Mania 2 if Sega lets it be. But either way, even if it just stays a fan game, it's one of the best ones I've seen in ages. It is an incredibly impressive effort from a team of what I assume are not professional developers But I'm super impressed with this. I hope that Sonic Overture continues on its path. It was the greatest Christmas surprise I've had in a long time. My hat is off to the team that made this, and we will stay locked in on Sonic Overture as it gets updates, so stay tuned to GVG to find out all you can about this amazing Sonic fan game. Links in the description below to both the current demo and the original if you'd like to see what the current demo is based off of, but impressive work all around. I can't wait to play more of this. Maybe I'll see if I can get it running on my Steam Deck. Until next time, folks. Bye!